Hello and welcome to the Forgeborn Finishing School. I'm Casey Kidd and I've created this channel to provide a space for Solforge Fusion players to learn tactics and strategies. The content was made specifically to bring value to beginner and advanced players alike. I'll be releasing regular 4-part series broken into cycles around major subjects and some bonus standalone videos along the way. Let's get into our first topic, aggression. When considering the first series focus, I asked myself, where could a player get the most immediate return on investment with a simple tweak of their gameplay? This is the first cycle where I will provide an overview and some limited in-game analysis on some of the major topics of aggressive play that don't focus around a specific Solforge Fusion deck archetype. In Cycle 2, we will discuss the mixed archetype of aggro control, which affords you limited manipulation of your opponent's board while keeping the pressure on. Cycle 3 will be dedicated to mobility decks, which are often the most difficult to master. Lastly, Cycle 4 will cover the always entertaining creature type synergy, dinosaurs. A core tenet of aggression decks is to reduce your opponent's health to zero as quickly as possible. Though that's the primary goal, it's not always so simple. When playing aggressively, your life points may also drop quickly. It's this part that is often the hardest for new players to cope with. When playing an aggressive deck, I imagine that I am skydiving with my opponent and I am determined to be the last one to land. This is done through tactically controlling your life points descent. One of the major ways to control the descent is by making meaningful choices to block enemy creatures. Every time you choose to place one of your creatures in the back row to block an opposing creature, you must ask yourself, what am I gaining and what am I losing from this play? It often comes down to, I lose a creature, my opponent loses a creature, and I don't lose life. This seems okay on the surface, and often is, but it is harder to gauge the lost opportunity cost. To make this difficult decision, ensure you ask yourself these questions. Am I leveling up something less desirable in hand? Could playing a creature in a surviving lane be more beneficial next turn? Oftentimes, utility creatures have huge impacts in this game. Does my deck contain a card that could easily deal with the unblocked creature next turn? And what are my rough odds of drawing that card? Lastly, if you're off Forge with an aggressive creature and can hit your opponent for more damage than they will hit you, that is often an easy trade. It gets increasingly difficult to make that decision if your health total drops below your opponent's. Windspark Elemental is an aggressive creature that is able to damage an enemy creature based on the amount of damage it deals to the opposing player. This is a great aggressive card when played off Forge to deal damage to an opponent while removing a creature from the board. This card does lose much of its value if drawn during on Forge turns. One thing to keep in mind, when using this creature off Forge, your opponent's end of combat abilities are going to resolve first. This can lead to situations that diminish Windspark Elemental's effectiveness, though it's rare. Flamejet is the quintessential aggressive card. It can be used to deal direct damage to your opponent, and if you choose to receive the same amount of damage, it is a free card. This leads to some pretty fun combos we will discuss in future cycles. Flamejet is all about expediting the landing phase of the skydiving example, which makes all of your other choices to control the descent that much more impactful. Palladium Simulacrum is an Alolan mobility creature that gains attack damage anytime a creature moves lanes. In the right decks, this creature can scale up wildly in attack power very quickly. Because of mobility, it can also be very difficult for your opponent to block when they are on Forge. Epoch Hawk is one of the great utility cards, but at first glance can be easily overlooked, especially for an aggressive-minded player. Its synergy with the Palladium Simulacrum helps it immensely. Just one activation of its ability will trigger the Simulacrum's ability twice. Additionally, for any creatures that don't have mobility, it affords you an opportunity to move them around the board, making it difficult for the opponent to block effectively. The Pterodon Mauler is one of the dinosaurs that demands attention, and can do so without relying on other dinosaurs' synergistic effects. When replacing a creature, the Mauler gains attack power and temporarily gains aggressive and breakthrough. This is in addition to its other ability that allows you to increase the health and attack power of other friendly creatures, after it damages the opposing player. This card is a very difficult threat for opponents to defend against, and is one of those rare scenarios discussed earlier that can interfere with the Windspark Elemental's ability to remove creatures effectively. The Utera Rex is the primary card that turns dinosaurs from a bunch of fun, disparate cards into an aggressive runaway train that can shut down opponents. His ability allows any dinosaur you play to battle an enemy creature. Subsequent levels buff the dinosaurs prior to the battle. Rex makes it very easy to keep your opponent's board clear of creatures and yours full of pumped up dinosaurs. The rooted modifier seems like an odd choice to some players, but the longer this Rex stays on the board, the closer your opponent gets to that final landing. Lastly, let's get into the final portion of our lesson today with some battlefield analysis. On our side of the board, we have a Blight Witch and a Raging Necromancer in the front of the lane while sitting at a flush 50 health. The opponent is off Forge, has a Raging Spell Knight with 6 armor in play, his Forgeborn ability, Lightning Speed, which can give his creatures +2 attack and aggressive, and is sitting at 33 health. Their play will be the last action before combat. Currently there is a 17-point health disparity, and we have 2 of our most powerful utility creatures on the board. The opponent would really like to destroy the Blight Witch and preserve health. In this scenario right now, the opponent is recalling that he has a suppressing creature in his deck and a Sonic Burst, 2 cards that can remove the Blight Witch while moving into the 3rd turn of Cycle 2. This gives him a very high chance to remove the Blight Witch prior to activation. After completing some rough math and making a calculated decision to deal with the Blight Witch in a future round, the opponent is still considering blocking the Blight Witch and removing the threat instantly. But their aggressive instincts take hold, and the Aegis Knight is played in an open lane. This gains 2 attack for his creature with armor, and then Lightning Speed is activated to give their creatures 2 additional attack and aggressive. After combat, our previous lead of 17 health points has quickly diminished to a 6-point lead with a neutral board state. One of the best parts of playing aggressively off Forge is the opportunity to move directly into the Forge and have a second play without opponent intervention. Here the opponent plays the Suppressing Captain, destroying the Blight Witch before she can activate, bringing our analysis scenario to a close. Thanks for attending this lesson with the Forgeborn Finishing School, where we discussed some of the quintessential aggressive cards you can use on the battlefields of Solace. Our next cycle in this lesson will be discussing aggro control cards and mechanics, specifically with some in-depth battlefield analysis. If you like this video, please subscribe, comment, and consider donating to our Patreon account. I'm Casey Kidd, and I look forward to our next lesson.